awaken each day with eyes open, yet something inside remains asleep. You move, you speak, you perform, but the soul lags behind, tethered in silence. And though your body walks among the living, your spirit whispers, "I am tired, but I do not know why." Most do not realize this. What we call tiredness is often not of the flesh, but of the self-forgotten. A soul can grow weary not from labor, but from misalignment, from living a life that pleases the world but starves the inner truth. And the greatest danger is not the fatigue itself, but that we dismiss it, medicate it, or silence it when in fact, it is the soul's final attempt to be heard. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are disconnected. And until you face the reason for your spiritual exhaustion, no amount of sleep will ever awaken what lies dormant within you. The question is not, why am I tired? But rather, when did I begin to abandon myself? There is a kind of tiredness that sleep cannot touch, a weariness that coils itself deep within the psyche, not from exertion, but from the quiet starvation of meaning. Most people speak of being tired as if it were merely physical. But the soul, when neglected, begins to express itself in symptoms the body does not understand. And yet it speaks through the heaviness in your limbs, the restlessness in your chest, the inexplicable dullness in moments that should feel alive. You call it burnout, exhaustion, lack of motivation, but I tell you it is the soul crying in a forgotten language, one buried beneath routines, obligations, and masks. In my early years, I often felt the same burden, a strange fatigue that lingered not from the day's efforts, but from the feeling that I was drifting from something essential. During my medical studies and even in my early psychiatric work, I sensed that we were not treating people. We were managing symptoms while ignoring the deeper cries of the human spirit. I observed patients who had wealth, health, and freedom, yet they came to me hollow, speaking in riddles of fatigue, anxiety, and discontent. What they truly needed was not rest but reunion with their unlived truth, with the voice they had long silenced. As the alchemists once wrote, "As above, so below, as within, so without." If there is no peace within, there can be no energy without. This is the truth we forget in modern life, where everything external is treated and internal cries are dismissed. A man may work endlessly and still feel poor, not because he lacks gold, but because he has not mined the gold of the self.
He may eat well and sleep long,
and yet feel starved because he has not fed the hungers of his own soul. So when your body whispers, "I am tired," listen carefully, for beneath that whisper may be the voice of your inner life, forgotten and waiting, speaking not of rest but of return. There is a great misconception in the modern mind that exhaustion comes only from effort, from tasks, from the relentless wheel of doing. But the soul knows better. One does not burn out merely from work, but from the persistent effort of wearing a mask that was never truly theirs. It is not the weight of duties that breaks us, but the cost of sustaining a self that is false. You see, when we must play a role each day polished, pleasant, agreeable, efficient, we begin to hemorrhage vitality, not because the world demands too much, but because the self we offer it is not the one we were born with. I have seen this in the eyes of men who rose with the sun and built empires, and yet crumbled silently when the applause faded. I recall vividly a patient, a banker of great renown, who confessed to me, "Doctor, I no longer know which version of myself is real." He smiled for clients, nodded at dinners, and succeeded in every visible metric. But inside he was vanishing. He was not tired from finance. He was tired from the pretense, from the constant vigilance of guarding his true face. This is the fatigue that corrodes the spirit, not the exertion of labor, but the erosion of authenticity. To betray your truth day after day, even in small, polite doses, is to slice away the soul in increments, and the world rarely notices. In fact, it rewards the illusion. But deep within you feel it, the weight that no one sees, the hollowness that follows you even into rest. And then you ask, "Why am I so tired?" Not realizing it is not from doing too much, but from being too little of who you are. Even the gods of old wore disguises, but never forever. You were not made to live as a mask. And when the mask becomes your only face, the soul begins to protest not with shouts, but with silent sorrow and unbearable fatigue. The most tragic aspect of this silent fatigue is not merely that it exists, but that the world applauds it. You rise each morning, put on the face that pleases, deliver the words that comfort others, and perform the self that meets expectation. And for this you are praised. You are called stable, admirable, selfless, but behind that applause lies a danger.
More insidious than criticism.
The danger of being rewarded for your own disconnection. I recall during my travels through the spiritual deserts of the psyche, how many individuals I met who were admired by their communities, yet inwardly unraveling. The teachers, the mothers, the businessmen, even the clergy all wore their masks, so well that the world forgot to ask who lived beneath them. One woman, well respected in her village, confessed to me in tears, "They say I am the pillar of strength, but inside I am ashes." She wasn't honored for her authenticity, she was applauded for her abandonment of it. You see, society does not recognize the soul's language. It celebrates consistency over honesty, conformity over wholeness. The moment you suppress your real feelings for the sake of harmony, when you silence your needs to maintain the peace, or smile through sorrow to be perceived as strong, the world does not question it. It rewards it. And thus, the deeper you exile yourself, the more you are praised. But this is not success. This is self-erasure. And while the applause may be loud, the silence within you grows louder still. Seneca once wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor." I would add, it is not the man who is weary from labor, but the one who is emptied by applause, who is truly lost. If your fatigue is met with praise, beware. You may be applauded not for your truth, but for your ability to disappear without complaint. And no soul can thrive in the echo chamber of admiration when that admiration is built upon its absence. There is a kind of weariness that does not come from the burdens of the world, but from the betrayal of your own inner truth. Each time you said yes when your soul whispered no. Every moment you remained silent when your spirit longed to speak. Each smile you offered while you ached inside, these small betrayals, though quiet, accumulate. And eventually the psyche can no longer bear the cost, not because it is weak, but because it is real. I once observed a man whose days were spent in service to other, dutiful, composed, ever reliable, yet his eyes held the sadness of someone who had never been asked what he wanted. He came not with complaints, but with fatigue, one so profound it haunted even his dreams. I asked him not what was wrong, but what had he never dared to want. The answer did not come easily, because the longer one abandons their truth, the harder it becomes to remember its shape. These betrayals begin innocently. You soften your voice so others feel strong. You accept invitations your body resists. You offer help when your own cup is dry. You say you're fine when you're unraveling. And the world calls you kind, generous, noble. But deep within, a fracture begins. As Heraclitus once wrote, "Character is destiny." When your outward choices contradict your inward nature, the soul suffers. Not immediately, but inevitably. The body begins to echo this dissonance. A heaviness in the chest, a tightening in the throat. A vague sadness at moments that should bring joy. This is the self protesting, not dramatically but consistently. The soul does not punish you for these betrayals, it simply refuses to shine through them. And so you grow tired, not because you are doing too much, but because you are doing too little of what is true. Fatigue is the soul's final protest against self-betrayal. It is not asking you to push harder, it is begging you to come back. There is within each of us a shadow, not a demon, not a defect, but the darkened chamber of all we have abandoned to be accepted. And the more we seek to live only in the light, the heavier the shadow becomes. It does not vanish by being ignored. It grows dense with every truth repressed, every instinct denied, every dream shelved for the sake of appearances. And this weight, though unseen, is what so often exhausts the soul. The shadow is born not out of evil, but out of avoidance. It is composed of what was once alive in us, our wildness, our rage, our joy, our desire, our voice in which we buried to fit into a world that rewarded control over wholeness. I once treated a man who had been a gifted musician in his youth, but his family valued practicality, not poetry. He traded his strings for spreadsheets, his passions for security. And yet he came to me decades later, unable to sleep, unable to feel, not depressed, not ill, just unbearably tired. Tired because his unlived life followed him like a ghost. We do not escape the parts of us we reject. We drag them through the years as a psychic burden. What is unexpressed becomes compressed. and what is compressed eventually collapses under its own gravity, as I have said before. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is not metaphor, it is medicine. The unlived life becomes the shadow, and the shadow becomes the silent architect of your suffering. Fatigue in this sense is not a failure of energy. It is the weight of everything you could have been and were not allowed to be, and so the soul falters, not from too many footsteps, but from all the steps not taken, the dreams not pursued, the words not spoken, the dances not danced. You are not just tired, you are burdened by the echo of your own potential, unheard and unfelt, and it is time to listen. There comes a moment, often unnoticed, when a person ceases to live and begins merely to function. You wake, you move, you perform the roles assigned to you. But something essential no longer stirs within. You laugh on cue, respond when spoken to, and fulfill expectations with mechanical grace. Yet behind the eyes there is vacancy. You are present in form but absent in spirit, no longer a being but a shadow of one. This is not depression in the clinical sense, nor is it idleness. It is the slow, silent evaporation of the soul. In my own journey through the corridors of the unconscious, I met many individuals who described this spectral sensation, the feeling that life was happening around them, but no longer through them. I remember a man who had all the trappings of success, a family, a profession, a respected name, yet he sat before me hollowed, saying, "I feel like a ghost in my own life." He was not in crisis, and yet every breath carried the weight of disconnection. His days were filled, but his spirit remained untouched. He was functioning with precision, but no longer living. This condition is far more widespread than we acknowledge. We are taught to manage, to endure, to be dependable, but we are rarely taught to feel, to connect, to be real. The soul does not thrive on stability alone, it hungers for sincerity, spontaneity, the rawness of joy and sorrow. When these are absent, life becomes a script, a routine, a theater in which the actor forgets that he once had a voice of his own. Plato once warned, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But I say this, the unlived life is what leads to soul death. You can achieve much and still feel empty. You can appear radiant and still be unseen. If you feel as though your essence has thinned, as if you are flickering behind a mask, it is not imagination. It is a warning. You are not meant to be a ghost in your own story. You are meant to be its author, its fire, its breath. So now, as you stand at the edge of this quiet revelation, let your tiredness no longer be something to resist, but something to revere, for it has brought you here not to a collapse, but to a crossroads. The world may still demand your performance, your smile, your obedience, but your soul is asking for something else. It is asking for truth, for rest, for return. You are not broken. You are not weak. You are awakening. Let this be the moment you choose differently. Let this be where you stop running from the ache and begin listening to it. Turn inward. Strip away what no longer belongs. Stop apologizing for needing silence, softness, sincerity. The journey back to yourself will not be fast, nor will it be easy, but it will be sacred, and it will be yours. If these words stirred something in you, something you could not name, but have always known, then I invite you to stay with this work. Subscribe. Not merely to this channel, but to your own healing. Share this with someone who wears the same mask. And above all, begin again. The way home is not outside you. It begins now, and it begins within.